Chapter 10. Vale of Tears. With my energy spent, I dropped to my knees. Without the Kitsune to bolster the hostile Jing, they broke and ran. Shirohi and her pride easily cut down any remaining fighters. Seiro was the first to arrive at my side, followed by Corsa. I allowed Corsa to lift me like a small child and carry me to my waiting wagon. The Fesho whined and stamped their hooves, anxious to be away from the smell of blood and smoke. "Rosha," I began, but Corsa urged me to silence by laying her clawed hand on my shoulder. She gave me a gentle squeeze to convey her understanding before going to help Pasha. I leaned against the back of the wagon and watched Shirohi and the rest of her pride through a veil of tears. I had lost at least one friend, and I wasn't sure about the other, who lay motionless on the ground next to Sarofa. Cairo wrapped his arms around me, trying to comfort me. "It is never easy to lose a friend. Just know that she died to save you. Had she not done as she had, you would be lying in her place, and everyone would have suffered a similar fate. None of this would have happened if I hadn't been selfish." I stared at Seiro with unblinking eyes. She would still be alive if I had gone home. I will never forgive myself for her death. Seiro pulled me closer, and I buried my face into his shoulder and cried. Tears for a friend I barely knew, tears for a sister. We buried Rosha the next day in the middle of a grove of massive oaks. I watched in silence as the Lowenfrau carefully covered her shallow grave with heavy stones. Rosha had committed the most honorable thing any Lowenfrau could have done. She had given her life to save those of her family. Shirohi and the rest of her pride stood in silent mourning. Though I had been adopted into the family, I felt I had no place within their circle. Only Shirohi and Corsa had come out of the fight unscathed. Sarofa had received multiple cuts from the claws of the Jing, along with a swollen eye that had been hit by a thrown rock. Shiroli's arm was heavily bandaged to cover the hole where a spear had been thrust through her bicep. The Lowenfrau Sarofa had been protecting had lost her eye in the fight and had been knocked unconscious. Pasha suffered only minor bruises and cuts. She still lay in the back of my wagon, recovering from the power struggle with the four-tail. After midnight, the Lowenfrau, with the exception of Shirohi, bedded down for the night. Shirohi would take the first watch. I was unable to sleep. I lay staring at the stars, replaying the fight in my mind. I could still feel Rosha's breath on my face as she breathed her last word. Pasha had explained that Schwester meant sister. To me, it meant so much more. I couldn't find the words to describe the feeling, but it bore heavily on my soul with not only sorrow, but honor. I sighed heavily before getting up. There was no point in trying to find sleep when it so desperately escaped me. I made my way to where Rosha lay buried to kneel at the head of the grave. "I shall miss you, my friend. Nobody has ever treated me the way you did. You showed me what it truly meant to have a friend, someone to talk to." I ran a claw against one of the larger pieces of flat stone. Without thinking, I used my gift to inscribe a short message. "Rosha, honored friend and protector. Your life is my strength. Hunt well, Schwester. You will be missed." For the second time in less than 2 days, I cried as I had never cried before. When no more tears fell, I lay beside my friend, whispering stories of my own world. I wove tales of the mountains I had loved, giving as much description as I could remember. Rosha had enjoyed listening to my stories of home, and I could think of no other gift for the dead than one last adventure in a land she would never get the chance to see and yet longed for. I woke with a start. Corsa knelt over me, watching me carefully. When I sat up, she pointed to the inscription on the stone questionably. When I only stared at it, Corsa gestured for me to follow. The sun had yet to rise, and I suspected I had not been asleep long. She led me to a small fire where Shirohi sat holding one of the long bows that Rosha had been teaching me to shoot only a week before. Shirohi never looked up from the bow she held in her hands. "Rosha be long miss. She think you cub never have." Shirohi looked up at me. For the first time, I could see the pain of the loss on her face. You be Rosha cub, this be Rosha bow, this be your bow. I took the offered bow carefully in both hands. I remembered how Rosha had laughed at me the first time I had tried to shoot it. The memory led to other pleasant memories of other times I spent practicing with her. I thought of how the older Lowenfrau would gently correct me every time I made mistakes. She never lost her temper with me as my own mother would on occasion. I smiled at how Rosha would look at me when I attempted to repeat the words I had learned. How she would tilt her head in thought, trying to understand my strange accent. I held the bow tightly to my chest. I will never forget her. I can only hope to be as good as she tried to make me. I hope to make her proud. Shirohi nodded once before staring back into the fire. Corsa led me back to the wagon so I could try to get some sleep. Before she left, she squeezed my shoulder. Rosha, be proud. We all be proud. You bring Rosha honor in word you make on stone. I felt her claw slip from my shoulder as Corsa returned to her watch. We broke camp late the next morning. I could hear the thunder rumble in the distance, heralding the approaching storm. I couldn't wait for it to arrive so I could wash away the smell of burnt hair and clean the soot out of my fur. The more I observed the darkening sky, the more it reminded me of my trial upon the pillar of stone. I closed my eyes as I walked along ahead of the wagons, taking in the scents carried on the breeze. I could smell the approaching rain, feel the dampness in the wind. I welcomed the strengthening pressure pushing against me. I opened my eyes at the sound of Pasha shouting my name. The wagons had stopped among a stand of extremely large trees where the drivers struggled to control the nervous fascio. For the first time, I felt the ground shake violently. The lightning and thunder had finally reached us. I could see the trees begin to bend under the weight of the heavy winds. We had just gotten the wagons anchored when the rain came. A strong gust sent the stinging drops against us like millions of tiny darts to pierce the skin. I returned to the rest of the team who were trying to find cover within one of the wagons. The fascio did the best they could to avoid the storm by laying on the ground between the wagons. I came up with an idea when I was shoved forward by a gust of wind. The ground began to shake, but this time it was not because of the thunder overhead. Large stone slabs began to rise around the wagons to shield us against the battering wind and rain. I could hear the wind hitting the rocks, howling in defiance. I used my power to bend the slabs to form an arch to protect us on 3 sides. Once complete, it resembled a half-egg with an opening facing away from the wind. We waited patiently for the high winds to ease significantly before daring to venture out into the downpour of rain to bathe. It had taken the remainder of the day and most of the night for the wind and lightning to move on into the distance. Investigation revealed several of the large trees had either been uprooted or broken in 1 or 2 places. The road had been transformed into a small stream of water running away in the direction we planned to travel. "What was that?" I asked Sero. Sero sat on the back of his wagon, chatting with his driver when I thought to inquire about the storm. "It is a sign of winter approaching. The violent storms will continue to blow in from the Great Sea off and on for the next couple of months. When it is finally over, winter will be upon us." I now knew that the sparkling I had seen when climbing the mountain was indeed a great body of water, likely an ocean. How big is the Great Sea? Nobody knows. Our fishing ships sail for days without ever seeing land. Many sailors claim it is endless, while others claim that if you travel far enough, you will fall off the side of the world. Xero chuckled at this. Our fishermen are a superstitious lot. We encountered another of the great storms as we descended the other side of the mountain 2 weeks later. This one had been significantly stronger than the last, but thankfully we were able to locate a cave to accommodate both the wagons and the fascio. We weathered out the storm for 3 days before it too moved on. The road out of the mountains became rough, the rain having cut deep trenches across it. At the base of the mountain, we came across another village almost untouched by the passing storms. The 1-story buildings were made of stone instead of wood, and the village itself had a low stone wall surrounding it. I sent Shirohi and Corsa into the village to search for any Kitsune before entering. After our last encounter with a Kitsune, I did not want to risk my friends again. The Lowenfrau returned that evening to report that there were no Kitsune within this village and that the village elder welcomed us openly. The wagons rolled into the village well after dark. To our surprise, we were intercepted by a small crowd led by the village elder. The Lowenfrau were instantly on edge. The elder stepped forward and bowed. "Welcome to Crest Haven, honored Kitsune. We have been expecting you for many days now." I walked up to the old Hulijing female. I had not expected to be greeted in such a way after our last encounter with the Hulijing. "Expecting us?" Again, the elder bowed. "Yes, honored one. Our healer told of your coming weeks past. He said that the descendant of Graywood would come seeking refuge. We are sworn to the house of Graywood." Sero stepped forward to stand next to me. His eyes widened at the mention of my family name. "You are members of the Blood Moon? I was told that the Blood Moon no longer existed?" The elder only smiled in response. The greatest trick of the Great Nine-Tail was to convince the world he does not exist. The elder turned back to me. "We have made available your estate, young Graywood. If you would please follow us." We followed the elder and her escort to a sprawling old house covered almost completely in lush green vines. The courtyard contained immaculately groomed gardens of bushes, trees, and flowers. Cobblestone paths wove their way through the scenery in all directions. We followed the path down the center past the estate toward a small stone house with a red-tiled roof just beyond. We crossed a shallow pond that ran the length of the courtyard just before the entrance. The water was so clear I could see the small goldfish swimming lazily about. Only the narrow stepping stones provided access to the humble building beyond. The door was made of some heavy red wood with 2 gold Kitsune statues on both sides. In the center of the door was my grandmother's sigil carved into the grain. The elder stepped to the side, instructing me to place the palm of my hand in the center of the sigil. "The door will only respond to the heir and those loyal to her." I did as instructed, and the sigil on the door flared to life. Blue-white fire spread through my grandmother's sigil. The fire moved with a mind of its own as it erased the older sigil to replace it with my 7-tailed sigil. The fire cooled, and I withdrew my hand. As I did, there was a small click, and the door swung open slowly to reveal an antechamber to rival the one at Kano's palace. Instead of the statues displaying the burden of the races to the whole of the alliance, 2 large statues flanked an ornate redwood chair. Both statues stood tall and proud with their swords pointed toward the ground and their claws resting on the pommel. The definition in the muscles and clothing made them almost come alive. Behind the chair was another statue of a Kitsune looming over. It stood with its head bowed and holding out its claws in offering. The 2 Hulijing warriors stand to protect the Graywood family. Their swords are pointed down to advocate peace, but their claws stand ready to defend if need be. The Kitsune is a statue of Kayla Graywood. She stands with her head bowed in honor of our sworn loyalty, her claws extending out offering guidance and strength. I examined the statues in awe. They were masterfully done. I could almost feel every hair lightly carved into the white, oily stone. The swords were polished silver with an almost serrated look to their razor-sharp edges. The eyes stared out at the door to watch all those who entered. The statue of my grandmother was just as artfully done. Around her neck hung the same golden sigil Kern had given me. Her eyes peered out from under the bowed head. Behind her hung the 5 tails that marked her apart from any other Kitsune. There was no mistaking who she was. On her left wrist was the gold bracelet Sero had given her. I looked up at the elder through tear-filled eyes. "The statues are beautiful." The elder bowed her head again. "You honor my family, lady. My brother and I spent 5 years working to carve the soapstone. My son is responsible for the swords. They are his best work to date." "It grows late and we need rest," remarked Xero. "Where might we sleep?" "Of course. To the right you will find quarters for all of you." The elder gestured to an opening concealed behind a cascade of vines. "Lady Graywood, your rooms are this way." She dipped her head and extended an arm, inviting me to join her. I followed the old Jing to another wooden door that matched the one we had entered through. I did as I had with the other door, which resulted in the same effect. The room beyond was similar to the sitting room at the monastery, except it also housed a modest bathing pool and bowl-shaped bed at the far end. "This was your ancestors' private room. I am hopeful they are also to your liking." "They are more than adequate. Thank you." The elder bowed and left me to my own devices. The weight of the past month descended upon me suddenly, and exhaustion overtook me. I wanted a bath, but sleep refused to be ignored. I found a tray of fruit laid out for me in the sitting area along with a clean silk robe. I climbed wearily out of the bowl-shaped bed to retrieve the tray and carried it to the side of the pool. I used my power to warm the cool water before disrobing and sliding down into the steaming mist. I was only distantly aware of someone spiriting away my dirty clothes. I relaxed while absently plucking grapes one by one from the tray. Once the fruit was gone and the water began to cool, I climbed reluctantly from my soothing bath. The air had chilled considerably and sent shivers down my spine. I quickly dressed and went in search of my friends. I found Ciro waiting patiently by my door. Everyone else was either asleep or out in the village. My grandfather took my arm in his and led me out into the cooling evening sun. I was shocked to discover I had slept through the day without someone waking me. We walked to a small marble bench next to the clear pond that ran through the courtyard. There we sat, watching the sun slowly set against the mountain horizon. As the sun began to disappear behind the mountain, 2 Jing went about lighting torches throughout the garden. Kayla apparently kept many secrets from both of us. Cairo paused as one of the robed Jing passed close by before moving on. "I wonder how many of these places exist." I only shrugged. I was too caught up watching the bats swoop down to catch an early meal of moths drawn to the lights. They danced awkwardly upon the evening breeze, flapping their tiny wings, shrilling excitedly in search of food. I enjoyed the simple act of sitting with my grandfather, trying to make up for the lost years. I knew so little of my new world, and even less of my family. We sat silent for several hours until Serofa emerged from the building, stretching from head to tail. The Lowenfrau waved lazily before making her way out of the courtyard. I returned the wave enthusiastically, deciding it was time to investigate our surroundings.
We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Please stay tuned for more.